This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up? It's time to talk about your hot takes of the week. So let's just jump into it. This is from my video about why they hate on the Browns. And Renaissance Man says, there's not hate, it's respect. They don't respect the Browns because they haven't proved anything. You definitely have a point here, but if there's still time for them to prove themselves, go Browns. People leave funny comments, man. Yeah, one win over the past 5 years doesn't scare a lot of people. Here's my issue with this discourse. When people are asking for the Browns to be respected, we're not asking for you to be afraid of the Browns. We're not asking you to act like the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl this year. What we are asking you to do is say, hey, like this team went 11-6 last year. You should probably talk about them the same way that you talked about an 11-6 team. That's it. If your Ravens or your Bengals or your Steelers went 11-6 and nobody was respecting you as an 11-6 team, you would be frustrated too. You wouldn't be on here talking about some, yeah, well, we didn't get enough wins in 2020. Like, you win 11 games, you should be treated like an 11-game winner, especially when you're returning most of your starters. I think that's just a basic respect that a lot of Browns fans want. We're not asking to be crowned champion. We're not asking to be crowned Super Bowl winners. We're not asking to be your biggest nightmare team or anything like that. But we do ask to be talked about like an 11-6 football team. And the way that people talk about the Browns this offseason is not reflective of a team that finished 11-6 with 26% of their starters on injured reserve with 4 different quarterbacks. Like, they overcame that much. That's how good the roster is. They went 11-6, and as soon as the season ended, it's like that never happened. That's all people are asking for. And it's not even respect, to be honest with you. It's just talk about us like you should talk about the team. I talk about the Ravens as a team that was the 1 seed. Now, they've lost a couple players, right? But I'm not going to talk about them as like a 500 team. I talk about them as a team that was the 1 seed last year that's trying to stay in that same spot. I talk about the Bengals as a team that did not win a ton of games last year, but because they lost their starting quarterback. So they're obviously going to be pretty good this year if their starting quarterback stays healthy. Again, I don't sit here and ask for anything crazy when people are talking about the Browns, but you do have to respect what happened in reality. And I think that's what people are asking, right? They went 11-6 last year. They're returning their starters. It's only logical that you talk about them as an 11-6 team, and acting like that's ridiculous because the Browns haven't won a Super Bowl yet. I mean, like, that's everything I hate about current sports discourse. Like, we can't even talk about what happened because you want to talk about rings and all this bullshit. But yeah, great take. Keon Coleman could fall to the Browns in the 3rd round. We're going to react to the comments on this video. First comment here is from Donna Simmons. Shout out Donna. Says, PFN says Jatavion Sanders at 54, Kieran Amagaji at 85, and 156 Javion Coleman. I would switch out Javon Coleman with like Bo Limmer. Well, outside of that, it'd be great. I would love it. I would love that draft. What we learn with Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski's interview. And again, man, like, y'all should go back and make sure y'all check out that whole thing. Just a rare opportunity to see your head coach talk ball with your starting quarterback like that. You don't see that all the time, and it's always it's always very insightful when you get the chance to watch it. Only One Zay says, man, this interview went against everything them folks on Twitter were so quick to assume. Feels so good seeing a coach really talk in detail and show how much confidence he still has in Ford. Kevin Stefanski didn't even go and accept his Coach of the Year award, but he made sure to be there and do a podcast with his QB1. And this is like, because I heard a lot of discourse about this because, the people who want to be super negative about the team, they'll just say, oh, well, he's being paid to talk nice about Deshaun Watson. He's not being paid to do this. He absolutely did not have to show up down there. He absolutely did not have to go on Deshaun Watson's podcast. Honestly, to the contrary, he probably got advice not to go on Deshaun Watson's podcast because, it could be really dicey on whether that breaks the CBA rules and whether he's technically getting a coaching session in, or is it a podcast? Like, it's a little bit more murky. So I promise you, he didn't even get advice to go down there and do this. He did this because he wanted to do it, because that's what he honestly felt of his players. And this is something that Kevin Stefanski is known for within his locker room. He showed up to when Kareem Hunt had his baptism, a couple of years ago. He showed up to Kareem Hunt's baptism a couple of years ago. Kevin, cares about these dudes, and he wants to make sure that he shows that. And I think that's why this team plays so hard for him. You want to talk about the job of a coach. Part of that is making sure guys stay locked in through adversity. And what the Browns did last year, was some of the best coaching, if you judge it by that you can ever see, because all that adversity, these guys stuck with each other and they stuck with Kevin, which is just a reflection of the job that he does, at least in that locker room management part. So, yeah, this is great. And the fact that not only did he show up, do this thing with Deshaun when he absolutely did not have to, Deshaun went out of his way to give him his flowers, which tells you kind of how guys feel about Kev on this team. So, it's good stuff to see. For me, it's real wholesome to see this kind of stuff out of a Cleveland Browns locker room, because it's not stuff that happened for the first 20 years of the Cleveland Browns existence since coming back. Big name prospects that might fall to the Browns. I agree Q Sweat would be another Siaki Ika. Hasn't seemed to work there yet. The one thing I'll push back on with the whole T'Vondre Sweat is the next Siaki Ika thing is T'Vondre Sweat's clearly a better prospect than Siaki Ika was. I don't know how much of Siaki Ika's inability to get on the field has to do with how big he is versus if he's good or not. Because that's what I saw on the tape last year with Siaki Ika, was that at Baylor, he wasn't great. He wasn't a great athlete. He's not long to go with that size. T'Vondre Sweat is a long athlete to go with that. He's a plus athlete at that position. So he's a better, a tier above Siaki Ika when it comes to prospect level. But you do run into some of the same fundamental issues that you had with Siaki Ika. It's just a question of, does that player being better make that much of a difference? Why the Browns want a new stadium? Shout out to Pete Smith, had him on. Building the dome would be a smart thing to do. A dome would help you get more major sporting events, Super Bowl, NCAA National Championship games, NCAA Final Four, major concerts. It eventually pay off and then some. Also, if the Browns build a dome, I promise you, they're going to steal that Big Ten championship away from Indiana. I don't know. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, right? But I feel like that could happen as well. But yeah, this is a play to get more events, right? And it's not even all the events that people know about, right? Because you will get a Super Bowl maybe once. You'll get a national championship maybe once. You'll get a Final Four maybe 2 times. You'll get major concerts maybe 4 or 5 times, right? That's not what makes that dome pay for itself. What it does is stuff like Monster Truck, right? They're gonna have Monster Truck at the stadium now. Since it's at the stadium, more people are gonna come because the Monster Truck show is more interesting at the stadium, or they can have conventions or a whole listicle of other things that could be had there, right? Not World Cup stuff, because that's already been planned, but when the U.S. men's national team is doing exhibitions in off years, or maybe even before the Olympics, maybe you can get some of that there in Cleveland. It just makes Cleveland another place where cool stuff can happen at a very high level. And I think that's something that would be good for the city. Now, this has to be done right, right? There's a ton of ways that Jimmy Haslam and D Haslam can go about building this new stadium that can turn something that we are all kind of in favor of into a nightmare. So y'all be vigilant for that. I'm not just gonna give them a free pass on it because I like domes. But yeah, outside of like something like that popping up where they try to do something like truly nefarious with how this thing gets funded, it would be a good thing for the city and for the people in the Cleveland area. If we get a new stadium, I just want Jimmy Haslam to get a lot of input from the players and the NFLPA about the field so we can limit injuries that come along with having turf. I feel like the whole thing about turf creating more injuries is one of those things that has been overblown. And I get where it comes from. It comes from people wanting player safety. And it comes from players complaining on podcasts about playing on grass fields, and people like myself who tend to be more sympathetic to players kind of jump on that. But I don't think that point stands up to a lot of scrutiny, right? The whole point is that grass fields are much, much safer than turf fields. And there's some studies that indicate that. But when you hear people, especially medical people, explain why this might happen, it don't hold up. And what I'm saying is, like, I think people kind of get caught up with the idea of astroturf and people getting their like cleats caught in turf and like getting injuries like that, and that's how people get turf injuries. For the most part, that's not what happens, right? Brian Sutter, the doctor on YouTube that really goes over almost every football related injury there is, he talked about that Aaron Rodgers injury, and a lot of people blame that Aaron Rodgers injury on the turf at MetLife Stadium, but turned out had nothing to do with the turf. I think it's just one of those things that we associate. But if all 32 teams played on grass fields tomorrow, I don't think it changes the amount of injuries that happens in a significant way. I think the turf and the issue with turf is not that you're playing on it in the NFL. The issue with turf is that after 10 years of playing football, it does give you extra wear and tear. But think about where the bulk of that wear and tear is coming from, the bulk of the NFL players out there. It's not the turf that they're playing on in the NFL. It's the turf that they're playing and practicing on in high school. It's the turf that they're practicing and playing on in college. And then they get to the NFL and they might play on some turf. But honestly, in the NFL, it's probably the least amount of turf that you've played in your entire football career. But because you've been playing football on turf for like some of these guys stay in college like 2 extra years, 8 to 10 years, you get in the league, all that wear and tear pops up, and then boom. But if that same play happened on grass, it would have probably happened because what created the injury was the 10 years of wear and tear on the turf that you had at a high school level and at a college level. And it's real easy to say, hey, we could just change every field to grass in the NFL. That is something you could do. Sure, why not? If it's feasible, if it's not like super wasteful, cool. I'm not going to stand in front of that and say this shouldn't happen. But I don't think it's going to change the amount of injuries that are out there, because I think the bulk of these injuries comes from wear and tear from high school and college in those turf fields that they practice and play on versus what happens in the NFL. I think it's kind of blaming the symptom for the disease. You feel me? But that's just a whole nother video for a whole nother day. But yeah, I think that, the turf field, not turf field, I tend to not get too wrapped up into that debate, because I think the bigger issue is what they're playing on before they get to the NFL, not when they get to the NFL. And that's the part that's hard to solve, because you can argue the NFL team shouldn't have turf because it's cost saving. They make enough money. And that's true. That's why I'm not going to be mad if they go all grass in the NFL. I don't really care. But you can't make that same argument for 90% of college football programs. You can't make that same argument for almost 99% of high school football programs. Like, that argument makes sense in the NFL, but where the bulk of this damage is done, these kids just gonna have to play on turf because that's the best field that they can get access to, because the grass would be much rougher if they can't keep it at an NFL. It's just a more complicated issue than I think the current talking points about field turf versus grass are. Is I guess is my main point. Sorry about rambling on there. The Browns really want to get better at special teams. Algorithm says, do I feel like they're doing something incredibly stupid with the punt? Hey, man, it's my number one metric on if I hate a punt returner or not, because I can't stand dumb shit at punt return. I can stand somebody who doesn't return it. I can't stand somebody who does dumb shit consistently. That's why Donovan Peoples-Jones drove me up a wall when he was returning them punts, because he would like tease you with the idea that he'd do something stupid. It'd drive me crazy. Should the Browns draft a linebacker with Corey Kinnon? Shout out to Corey Kinnon for coming on. Scott says, seems to me that the linebacker role, is that Scott Zappa that used to do the Browns videos? Hey, if it is, then shout out to you, man. I used to watch them videos when I was in college. But apologies if you aren't no, that's F Zappa. I think that's F Zappa. That I'm pretty sure he still does it. He does like that and fish tours or something like that. Y'all know who I'm talking about? Please give a shout out to that man in the comment section. One of the original OGs of Brown's YouTube, my guy F Zappa. But I apologize if this is not you. Scott Zappa, it just made me think about that. My guy says, seems to me that linebacker role has diminished in the NFL, but also, of course, becomes smaller and faster. Question is, how many good linebackers do they need as opposed to defensive linemen in the secondary? I still say get one, but what I do know is it would please me at 54. Devin Bush has not proven to be a great player. So what happens if, well, I don't think Devin Bush is in that conversation to fill in if JOK gets hurt. And honestly, if JOK gets hurt, then you're probably just emphasizing guys like Grant Delpit and not Ronnie Hickman, but like D'Anthony Bell and Rodney McLeod more, than just like leaning on. You're not going to ask Tony Fields to be just JOK. You're not going to ask Jordan Hicks to be a JOK or anything like that. So I don't think that's how they would adjust to it. Teams, the thing is that, and I think Corey brought this up, right, is that teams are moving towards nickel being their base defense, which means that they're going to run nickel more than they're going to run base. So they're not having three linebackers out there. They're going to have two linebackers. Sometimes they go to a big nickel. Sometimes they go to a small nickel. The Browns are a team that can kind of do both because they got Grant Delpit. They can put Grant Delpit at the slot. They can put Greg Newsome at the slot. They can also, see if Martin Emerson can live out. Like, they have a lot of different options and versatility with the defense. So I don't know how many linebackers the Browns need to be successful. You also have to factor in Myles Garrett makes a lot of people's lives easier, and linebackers are probably a part of that, right? Like when a team is just dead set on not letting Myles Garrett through, it probably becomes a lot easier to kind of get to your fits if you're a linebacker because they're just not worried about touching you at all. So yeah, I think the linebacker is what it is. I don't think they need a ton of depth there. And I think there's a strong possibility that they can bring in guys later in the year if they really need to kind of fill what they need to do, because it's not really that difficult what they're asking these linebackers to do. The best left tackle for the Browns brought in my guy Vach Lombardi. And my guy User says, so refreshing to tune in Quincy and learn stuff. So much more entertaining than the usual clickbait offer from most of the rest of the media. Hey, man, if you have not seen this video, let me put the thumbnail back up there for y'all. If you've not seen this video, please check it out because 17 minutes into this, we talk about why right tackles and left tackles can't just flip positions like that. And Vach, like, the reason I love bringing him on is that he's very knowledgeable about these draft prospects, yes, but he also has kind of a coaching mindset about this whole thing. So if you ask him some specific questions, he starts to get into the nitty gritty of technique and why things don't work and the nuts and bolts. And it just really gives you a great understanding of that. Like, I think in this video, we talked about how your handedness, like what your dominant hand is, really does affect your ability to switch sides, right? Like, it's not something we ever talk about with a offensive lineman. What hand are they dominant? But it is something that like does affect you because it changes how your body reacts to different things. So it was a fascinating conversation about offensive line play. It always is when I bring in Vach. Make sure y'all check that out. But thank you guys for giving me your hot takes. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.